It's another day in Formula One, which means another day of new information about Daniel Ricciardo's contract situation for 2023. But as always, it's not good news. So if you're a Ricciardo fan, we advise you grab some tissues. With more information coming from the Australian himself, as well as the teams he may be targeting for the coming season, it is becoming increasingly clear that he will most likely miss out on a drive. Without further ado, let's look at why we believe his chances in 2023 are effectively over and what the future holds for the multiple Grand Prix winner. The Australian has received a financial settlement for the final year of his contract with McLaren, but would prefer to race in Formula One if a suitable opportunity presented itself. While it appears that Haas or Williams are Ricciardo's best options for next season, the 33-year-old would rather wait for something more appealing to emerge for 2024 than commit to a team that offers only a slim chance of a podium finish, let alone a win. A recent report linked Ricciardo to Mercedes as a reserve driver, implying that he could be in line to replace Lewis Hamilton in 2025 if the seven-time world champion extends his current contract for one more year and then retires. "I've certainly accepted if I'm not to be on the grid next year. I'm okay with that," he said to Fox Sports. "I've accepted I'm not going to do everything, or my management team's not going to do everything. Just put me on the grid if it's not right or it doesn't make sense. Obviously, this year's been challenging, and if I'm on the grid, I want to know it's at a place I can enjoy it and feel like I can thrive, an environment I feel I can thrive in. I don't want to just jump into a car for the sake of it." Ricciardo's season momentum improved slightly at the Italian Grand Prix, but he had to retire 6 laps from the finish after running comfortably inside the points. Days like this certainly are pretty frustrating, but I gave it 24-48 hours and I'll get over it and try to understand what's best for next year. Not in an overconfident or cocky way, but if it's not meant to be, then I'm totally okay with that. I won't be too proud. We haven't certainly given up on getting a seat, but that's kind of where my head is at the moment. So, what does Daniel Ricciardo's medium-term future hold? First and foremost, we do not believe the report that claimed that after taking a year off in 2023, Ricciardo would become a Mercedes test and reserve driver for the following season, potentially replacing Hamilton in 2025. He'd be a few months shy of his 36th birthday at the time, and he hadn't driven competitively in F1 for well over 2 years. Fernando Alonso has shown that hurdle can be overcome, and let's be honest, aside from his glorious 2021 Italian Grand Prix victory, Ricciardo has appeared to be a racer on the decline. Why would Mercedes want to keep him as a seat warmer when they have plenty of time to handpick a much younger successor to Hamilton? The only way it makes sense is if Mercedes anticipated a rapid departure from the Briton Aitken to that of Nico Rosenberg in 2016 and needed a replacement ready to step in, with Ricciardo being that person. To be fair, the Australian appears to be worth one more chance in a midfield team to see if he can still make it in F1. A return to Alpine, where he spent 2 years in 2019 and 2020, would have seemed like the perfect fit, but it appears they are looking elsewhere. If Ricciardo had been willing to return to the Red Bull operations as head of the junior squad, perhaps alongside Yuki Tsunoda or even Colton Herta if Gasly moved to Alpine, AlphaTauri could have worked. However, that has not been mentioned as a possible destination, so if Haas or Williams are not appealing to Ricciardo, he will have to wait and see what happens in the often unpredictable world of the F1 driver market. But here's the real blow. Gunther Steiner appeared to dismiss reports that Haas could sign Daniel Ricciardo for next season, dealing another setback to the Australians' 2023 ambitions. Kevin Magnussen's position with the team is secure, but Mick Schumacher is in danger of leaving F1 after only 2 seasons in the sport, which is synonymous with his father's name. The German's contract could still be extended, but Haas has made no secret of the fact that they are considering their options. In an interview with Speedweek, Steiner stated that Schumacher has produced very good races but lacks the consistency to perform well. But according to Mirror Sport, despite not having raced since 2019, Nico Hülkenberg is a genuine contender being considered by Haas. Since then, he has served as a reserve driver for Aston Martin, which has just announced that F2 champion Felipe Drugovich will take over the role starting next season. In response to that suggestion, Steiner mentioned Ricciardo's name, admitting that the team would prefer an experienced teammate for Magnussen. "I've talked to most of the potential drivers, which is my job. There's nothing concrete yet, but we only want to take the smallest risk for the development team. We can take a big risk which is greater when it works, but it's bad when it doesn't. There are none of experienced and technical drivers who are currently on the market, except maybe Daniel Ricciardo, but his form isn't great at the moment and we don't know what he's going to do. Maybe he'll sit out next year. As I said, I talked to everyone." While there are concerns about a possible transfer to Haas, there is even more uncertainty in the Williams camp. After debutant Nick de Vries's Monza heroics, in which he scored 2 points and beat the final nail in Nicholas Latifi's F1 career coffin, there is a real danger that the Dutchman will be regarded more favorably than Ricciardo. Indeed, many in the paddock believe it would be unfathomable if Nick de Vries did not get a drive next season, and Williams appears to be the most obvious option given their affiliation with Mercedes and de Vries's participation in that junior program. Another important point to note is that de Vries may be driving the Williams again in Singapore, as Alex Albon is still recovering from appendicitis surgery. Albon developed respiratory failure after the surgery, which was thankfully successfully treated, and he was discharged from the hospital on Tuesday. Nonetheless, Singapore is likely the most physically demanding race on the calendar, giving Albon less leeway in terms of his recovery. If de Vries drives well in Singapore, which doesn't have to be a points finish mind you, the seat will almost certainly go to the Formula E champion. But that's not it. Consider how far Ricciardo's reputation has sunk over the years, from one of the best racecraftsmen on the grid to a laughingstock for many. This is perfectly captured in a recent interview with 1997 world champion Jacques Villeneuve, who has given a harsh assessment of Daniel Ricciardo's career, saying nearly half of it has been terrible and questioning why any team would pursue the Australian signature. When asked if he was surprised that the embattled Australian had not been picked up by any team, Villeneuve was blunt. Why would he be? He had 2 terrible years at Renault and 2 even more terrible years at McLaren. That's 4 years. Almost half of his Formula One career was bad. Alpine have no reason to take him, especially when he's driven there before. The modern cars don't just seem to suit his driving style. He was impressive at Red Bull. He showed amazing overtaking maneuvers. He was ahead of Max at the beginning, but in the end, Max started to get a handle on him. Then he switched, and after the switch, something seems to have happened that he never managed to get a handle on. He never recovered from that. Villeneuve was also critical of Ricciardo's decision to take a year off from racing before returning in 2024 or waiting for another opportunity. It could make him lazy. You can take a year off if you're an Alonso, a Schumacher, if you've won world champion and won a lot of races, if you know in the paddock that you'll always be at your best no matter what season. After 4 bad years, don't do that. You take what you can get. If you have an offer to drive in Formula One, then you take every cockpit. In public, you say you don't want to drive for one of the back teams, but if that's the only contract you can get, then you'll sign it. So, as you may know, Villeneuve isn't one to sugarcoat things. But while he may be going a little too far, his statements are not without merit. And the reality is that Ricciardo's situation is getting more and more dire over time, and the more he waits, the lower his chances are of finding a drive for 2023. What are your thoughts? Is Daniel Ricciardo as washed up as Villeneuve suggests? Should he be considered by any team after his 2 disastrous years with McLaren? Could he go on leave in 2023? And if so, how will that affect his future? Let us know in the comments section down below. And if you enjoyed the video, consider liking and subscribing. It helps us out a lot.